All right, so if you didn't finish, just finish it later. So you should have gone through after you, when you take enough time to do it, you go through the whole thing, you leave blank the things that you don't know, you draw a line for the things you do know, then you add up the number next to the letter. And whichever you knew the least about, whichever one had the highest number, is the one you need to study the most. So if you have the highest number in Earth system resources, that's what you want to focus your attention on and kind of go down from there. One thing you need to pay attention to though, and this is the part that we haven't covered in class yet this semester, is this last one, which is, not that one, this one, pollution. Notice that each one of them are 10 to 15% of the exam comes from each of those sections. Oops, sorry. Except for pollution, which is 25 to 30% of the exam. So most of the stuff that's going to be tested is pollution. But it gets integrated with all the other stuff. So that's why we saved it for last, so that we can go over the pollutants. Right. So when you get a chance, you can finish that up. So here's some tips for writing the APES essays. Essays, free response is the same thing. Technically, it's called free response, but I call them essays. So. All right, this sheet was made for me. Actually, well, not me specifically, but when I was getting trained to do this, like 8 or 9 years ago, this was given to me by one of the writers of the exam, so one of the head people that wrote the essays, and I kind of used it. Well, and I should have cited it properly. So you're going to see some terms that look a little weird, but we'll go through it. So you want to make sure you do all this stuff. Read each question carefully. Remember the difference between describe, discuss, explain, compare, and contrast, because they have different meanings. And sometimes you'll just list and you won't describe it, and it says describe. It rarely says list. So list the pollutants, list the, whatever. They rarely say list. So you need to know what each thing means. So if it's describe, you're going to spend about a sentence going into detail about what you just listed. Discuss is usually a couple sentences. Compare and contrast, they don't ask those a lot, but you got to remember to do the comparison and the contrast. They don't usually put that in there very much because they don't want to trick you. Well, they do want to trick you, but not in that way. All right, so don't bother restating the question. It's not English class. You just want to start your answer. You can even bullet it if you need to. But you're not writing an essay like English or history where you write an intro paragraph. You just go into it. Don't bother restating the question. As you know, I do the reading in the summer, so the last week of school I'm going to be in Cincinnati reading papers, not yours, probably people from California. They mix this up. But one of the things that we do is we go through and we find the answer, we highlight it, we put the points up to the side, and then we don't read the rest of it. Because if you think about it, we have like a certain number we need to get through, and we need to get through it in a certain amount of time. So we do it fast. We grade an essay in probably about 5 minutes.
Oh my God.
So we're looking at a stack like this, and you got to think of the people that are reading it. Do you really want to sit there and read it for, spend your whole 8 hours? Yes, you can pay them to do that, but you want to get through it. So they might give you like 1,000 that you have to get through in a 4-day period. The sooner you get through it, the sooner, and you do it right. You got to do it right, obviously. But the sooner you get through it, the more free time you have. So people are going to grade it, put it off the side, grade it, put it off the side. They're not going to look for the answer. That's what's different between environmental science, when you're writing the essays, and say English or history. They'll actually try to find the correct answer. In the readers here in environmental science, we don't look for the correct answer. We look at the first thing that you wrote. Okay, that's first answer. We look at the second thing, and you might have a beautiful third one, but if we only looked, or they only asked for 2, we're just going to look at the first 2. We're not going to say, okay, I'm going to take the best. You wrote 3 things. I'm going to take the best of those 3. We're just going to look at the first 2 that you wrote if they're asking for 2. So your opinion, well, it is relevant. That's changed a little bit. There are a lot of opinion questions. Like, what are you going to do in a certain situation? honestly, there's a lot of BS questions. So usually the first section, or letter A, it's A, B, C, D usually, sometimes the E. Letter A is usually recall some kind of fact. And B is usually doing something with that. C and D are usually an opinion. What are two environmental benefits? What are two economic benefits? It's always economic versus environmental for some reason. That's an opinion. What's an integrated pest management? That's an opinion. You can just kind of go with it, and as long as it makes sense, then it works. So you're not necessarily wrong. If you were wrong or right, meaning if there's a definitive answer, we wouldn't have all the problems that are in this test. So, the environmental problems, how do you get rid of the pollutants? That's an opinion question, and you just need to back it up with what you already know or learned. So it is a lot of opinion. Make sure you pace yourself. You only have 22 minutes per question. I didn't write that, don't do that. If you notice in class, I time you 40 minutes for the essay section, and you have 2 of them. I actually time you a little bit quicker than the AP exam. You're going to find the AP exam is a little bit easier than the tests I give you in class. Because I give you 40 minutes to do 50 questions. The AP exam gives you 90 minutes to do 100 questions. So if you actually divide that down, you would, if I did it truly to the AP exam time, you would have 45 minutes to do those 50 questions. But I cut off 5 minutes to get you going faster. Same with the essays. Technically, you're going to have 22 minutes to do each essay. I time it so that you do it in 20 minutes. So I got you going a little faster than you really need to go. So most people find that's a little bit easier. The timing is kind of weird at first and annoying and makes you nervous, but you'll find that you'll get through the essays easier. Make sure you read all 4 questions before you begin, and whichever one you think you know the most about, start with that one. Be sure to define every term you use. Don't throw in a term that you don't understand. If you forget a term, just write its definition. So if you're talking about ozone hole depletion, hopefully you'll remember that. But if you forget what it is, then if you go into a little bit of detail and describe what it is, you'll only lose like 1 point because you didn't write the actual term down. So you should remember the vocab words, but if you don't, just write down a definition and you'll get more credit. If you just write the word, you're not going to get full credit. So that's what that one says. If you can't recall a specific term, describe what you know and explain the concept. So get as close as you can. Don't be repetitive. A lot of times you're repetitive because you're trying to think of what you're going to write next. That's fine, that's normal. Just make sure you time yourself. So be concise. Be sure you follow any instructions. If this is important, so if you're asked to give an example, that means 1. If you're asked to give 2 examples, only give 2. Because if you give 3, they're not going to look at the 3rd one. They're going to look at the first 2. So if that happens, draw a line through the one that you think is the worst, or the one that you don't want them to read. So be sure to give complete sentences. Attempt to answer all questions. You're not going to receive a penalty for an answer unless it contradicts a previous one. You can only receive points for correct answers, so you don't get any points taken away. Okay?
So you can actually get a penalty if you contradict the previous answer?
It rarely happens.
But
rarely happens. There's a chance, but it rarely happens. I've never seen it happen, honestly. You don't say something and then say the opposite in the next sentence. I've never seen that happen.
Well,
it's possible, though. So you've noticed this when I give you the essay questions. The questions ask you to draw in information from different areas of the class. And if you notice from the beginning of the class, you're like, I don't know any of this. We haven't covered any of this. It's because we cover it throughout the semester. And if you notice, there's like 5 or 6 main points that are asked over and over again, just different ways. So you might be asked about ozone layer depletion. You're going to be asked about global warming. You're going to be asked about pollution and population, and how pollution affects population. Well, those are 2 different sections, but they're integrated into one question. So that's why, hopefully, you noticed, and hopefully This has been the case from the beginning of the course to the end of the course. When you get to the end, it's a lot easier to answer the questions, it should be, because you learn stuff, because it takes stuff from all parts, or it takes concepts from all parts of the course. So there's some information on graphs. Sometimes they'll give you graphs. You know how to do graphs, hopefully. Whoops. Actually, it's nicer, isn't it? You're going to be asked, probably almost 100% going to be asked to design an experiment. Make sure you know how to do that using the scientific method. They're going to give you the observation. They're going to say, oh, here's the problem. Usually it's going to be in the DBQ. It's going to say, okay, here's some background, document-based question. Can you give some background in that little clip, the Fremont Gazette clip? And then they're going to say, okay, design an experiment to isolate the moth population and see how it affects the trees or whatever. So they're going to give you the observation. Then you got to write a hypothesis. Remember, hypothesis is just a statement: if this, then that. And so when it says null is fine, that's something that you guys usually don't do. But if you said there is no connection between this and this, that actually is a fine hypothesis. You can say this doesn't relate to this, and you can say that. Remember to test one variable. So if you're looking at how sunlight affects plants, you're looking at sunlight. You need to keep the soil the same, the amount of watering the same, the type of plants the same. Everything else needs to stay the same except for the amount of sunlight that plant is getting. So that's what it means by keeping it at one variable. Make sure you have your test group and your control group, and that everything else is held constant. So all of the variables are held constant. That's, if you throw that term in, you just cover all your bases with that. Explain how you conduct the experiment, what materials you're going to need, explain what will be measured: growth, death, survival. So if you're saying, how do plants grow better outside in the sunlight or inside, how are you going to measure that? You're going to measure it because of the intensity of the greenness, color of the plants? You could. You could say, I'm going to measure the luminescence, or the amount of color that the plant, emits. It doesn't emit, it actually reflects. But that you could do it that way. You could say, I'm going to take the weight. You can do dry weight, where you dry it out and weigh it. You could grind it up in a blender and look at its volume. That's another way you can do it. So you got to say how you're going to measure whether something's better in one condition versus another condition. Explain how your data is going to be analyzed and what results you anticipate. Don't write down fake data and fake results, because that's fake. You're going to say, I collected data, analyzed the data, came up with a conclusion, there it is. You don't actually write a conclusion down. You say, I figure out a conclusion based on my data. Yeah.
But when you say your data, you have to actually say that you have to use actual data, right? That's the point.
Not unless they give it to you. Because you're designing the experiment and saying, well, I would go through these steps. But you don't have to say, I would find that 12 of the plants did this and 5 of the plants did that, because you don't need to make up the stuff.
Should we make it hypothetical that if I have this amount of plants and if they do this, wouldn't that be like...
Yeah, you can do it that way. There's a better way to say it, but yeah, you can do it that way.
Right, I know.
Yeah, you can say you're going to observe what happens between the control group and the experimental group. You're going to collect data, you're going to analyze the data, and you're going to draw conclusions on the data. That's all you really need to say, and then you've got it all covered. Write an essay, no charts, diagrams, or outlines. Actually, sometimes they will give you credit if you do a drawing, and if you can't, that's a good way to get yourself thinking. If you can't think about how the ozone layer works, they ask you for a description of hole in the ozone layer or ozone depletion. But you draw like a little earth, and then you draw a layer around it, and then you kind of label it. Usually when you do that, it starts to get your brain thinking, and you can refer to the diagram, and that way you actually wrote it out and you've done it properly. And diagrams actually do help you get to thinking of the answer if you can't put it in words at first. That sometimes happens. And they actually will give you credit for diagrams sometimes. Try to write neatly. I'll be honest with you, when there's a lot of essays and you're trying to grade them, if somebody's written really they're messy, then you're getting a headache and you're like, I don't want to read this. I mean, you can't just throw it off to the side, but you're less likely to read the whole thing and grade it slowly if it's a mess, because you got this whole stack of them you got to get through, and you're like, oh God, I don't read this one. So you do it really quickly and then you put it off to the side. So just being neat is actually going to add a little bit more points to you. But don't do it if it compromises the amount of time that you spend with the writing it. Yeah. Make sure you answer all the questions.
Right.
All right, this was given, this is actually made for teachers. And this is where we're told students have problems. So this isn't actually meant for you to see. This is for teachers to see. So it's going to say students have problems doing this, students have problems doing that. So basically the reason I put it in the packet is so that you know where people usually make mistakes. So, let me give you an example. So like here, students have difficulty with calculations, particularly those using scientific notation and energy conversions. So be aware of that. This basically tells you where people are usually weak. They have a tendency to explain the cause of an environmental problem, but they do not relate it to an effect or consequence. So that means you explain the cause and how it affects or a consequence of the cause. So that's basically telling you where people are usually weak. So if you know that, then you can hopefully fix your writing a little bit. Keep it in mind. Don't memorize the stuff, just like read through it. All right. So this is important environmental legislation. Second semester people in my class, you guys lucked out because first semester I had to do a bunch of legislation quizzes. You guys, because of the time, didn't have to do the legislation quizzes. So they had this. So this is actually more important. I mean, it's important for everybody, but if you're in second semester, this is more important for you because first semester was actually tested on this 3 times. I think it was 3 times. Yeah, 3 times. So these are different important legislations. They're going to always ask you in one of the questions to cite or refer to one of a national or local legislation. I'm going to ask you to write it down. So these are the main ones. And they're pretty self-explanatory. Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974 sets the minimum standard and regulates public drinking water. Sometimes if you can't remember it, and it's like you're like, oh, what about pollution and the air? The Clean Air Act. There you go. There's a Clean Air Act. There's actually a couple ones. Don't worry about the dates. They're not going to expect you to know specific dates. So don't memorize it based on dates. But these are important ones that you need to know so that you can refer to it in your essays. And again, if you can't remember, if you're on the essay, you can't remember the actual name, write out what the description is, and then you get partial credit. All right, so I'm going to show you some examples of the actual essay questions. Like I said, there's 3 types. There's a document-based question, there's a data set question, and then there's going to be 2 synthesis and evaluation questions. So this is an example of a data set question. It gives you a graph, it may give you a chart, a table, it's going to give you some kind of graphical pictorial of what you're looking at. And it's going to ask you questions. I want you to pay attention to this one. This is from the 2009 AP Environmental Science exam. Remember, there's 4 questions. This is number 4. I pulled this from that particular test. And it gives you some information, gives you the graph. Part A, realize this is all, I didn't change this at all, except for sticking my name in the middle of it. I didn't change it. So this is directly from that test copied to the paper with that stuck in the middle. But notice it says A, reply to the following questions based on the data of the graph below. And it says little one, calculate the increase in area of land, blah, 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 blah. So that's a calculation. Little 2, calculate the annual rate of increase in the land. Calculate, or 3, calculate something else. This is actually, they're tricking you here, because if you move to the next page, it says describe one environmental advantage and one environmental disadvantage. That's easy and that's an opinion. Describe one economic advantage and one economic disadvantage. That's easy, that's an opinion. These are fairly easy, and what they're hoping is that you won't read the whole question. They're hoping that you look at this one page, you start to answer this, and then you waste a bunch of time. Notice it's number 4. They want you to run out of time.
Oh.
This section A is worth the same amount as B, as C, as D, as E. So you've got all these little things that are worth like half a point when, this is worth the same amount as that whole thing. So my suggestion, and this is kind of a controversial thing, and a lot of people disagree with me on this, like the graders and other teachers and stuff, is to skip the calculation and go to it last. Because the calculation is going to take up, and unless you're really good at math, I would skip your calculation, move to the next part. Because you're always going to have a calculation, and in my opinion, it takes longer to do the calculation than it does to answer the question. So when you see that question as a calculation, leave it blank, move to the next section, finish all of your exam, and then spend the rest of the time doing the calculation. Because the calculations usually are worth the same amount as everything else, and in my opinion, I spend, and I've noticed other people spend, a lot more time on the calculations than they do on the rest of it. So there's usually going to be one calculation. I would skip it and come back into it at the end.
Well, because you said the point is that we won't have time at the end.
Yeah, but it's worth the same amount as everything else. So like in this, calculate, calculate, calculate. This A is worth the same as B. Describe one environmental advantage and one environmental disadvantage. That's easy. That's, a couple points right there. So, you can answer these 3 or 4 in the same amount of time it would take you to answer A.
It just seems like it's like
They try to trick you.
It's easier, but it's not like we're not applying mathematics, which is very important to these calculations, like in human geography, which is related to.
Also, with the calculations, you get more points for setting it up than you do for the answer. So if you set it up and you just can't do the calculation, because remember you don't have a calculator, but you set it up, then you say it's worth 5 points. You'll get 4 out of 5. If you get the answer right, you'll get 1 point. If you just give the answer without the setup, you don't get any points. So you always have to set it up. You can't just write an answer in there and do it in your head. You have to have the setup. So if you're running out of time, set it up and then just come back and solve it later if you have time. Yeah.
Do we have to write it out in a sentence, or can we just do the formulas?
You can really just do the formulas as long as they know the way you're thinking.
Do we have to answer each part of the question in order? Like, does it have to be A, B, C, D, or can we?
Sometimes it is, sometimes not. So you got to look at the question. Sometimes there's a question that says, and I've seen it once or twice where it says, okay, based on your calculation in A, answer B. Well, you're not going to get any points off if you answer A wrong. You just need to, in that case, you would want to do the calculation, but you kind of have to read the question and see how it's going to be asked. That's why you're supposed to read the questions before you start them. And my personal advice is save the math one, the whole math calculations for last, unless you're a super math whiz and can do math really well. So anyway, moving on. Example document-based questions, DBQ. See, you're used to that. It's a little clip out of a news article. You definitely want to read it before answering the questions. A lot of times, like in English, they say, okay, read the passage, then answer the question. And sometimes at least I used to try to answer the question and then go back and find the thing. Since this is short, you definitely want to read the thing and then answer the questions. Usually A and B are basically reading comprehension. It's in the clipping. So in this case, describe what an El Nino is and clearly indicate where it occurs. If you don't know what that is, it's in here. You just have to read for it. So usually A and B in document-based questions, A and B are recall of what's in the clipping itself. And in honesty, C and D are usually BS questions. You use what you know and then you adapt it to fit. So people in what part of the world would be most likely to be affected by the link between El Nino and disease? That's an opinion. There's no fact to that. That's your opinion. You just back it up. D, clearly describe 2 other important environmental problems associated with ENZAs. Well, it's up to you, what you think 2 other environmental problems are. So that's your opinion.
Yeah.
So that's usually how those work. Yeah.
How do you answer an opinion question when you were to grade the essays? Because if there's no right answer, how do you tell them wrong?
We get.
They have a list of right answers.
We have a list.
It's an opinion.
Yeah,
All right.
they have multiple answers.
Yesterday, you had, if you did the essay question, part A, it says, in addition to impacts on Colorado River system, climate change is impacting the hydrology of coastal ecosystems. Identify and describe 2 possible consequences of climate change on coastal ecosystems. They give us a list.
Oh, okay.
So that's why sometimes when you get something back, you're like, well, this should have been a right answer, but I marked it wrong. The reason is they limit us to what's on the list. So most of the time when you come up with an answer, it's listed somewhere in our rubric. It's a list. So we're like, okay, yeah, they got that, check. Don't overthink the questions. All right, synthesis and evaluation questions. You're usually going to have, remember D is worth the same amount as A. So you're usually going to have some kind of calculation. You may have some kind of experimental design question. And this is going to be the thing you want to look at right before or the night before and then morning of the test. Even if you, I hope that you study all the way up to it, but if you were to wait till last minute, go sit 10 minutes before the test, and this is the laziest way to do it.
Well, yeah.
If you were to do it as lazy as possible, this is what you want to look at. So this is your last minute, night before the test, day of the test cram review sheet. If you look through this, it's got everything. High quality energy, low quality energy, mineral reserve ore, alluviation loam, aquifers, effects of El Nino, nitrogen fixation. It's got that whole nitrogen cycle right here. Phosphorus, photosynthesis, aerobic respiration, primary, secondary succession, mutualism, just if you look through this, it's got everything that's in the class.
Wow.
In a sentence. So this is a quick memorization thing. So what is salinization of soil? You just had that on your last test. It's in arid region, water evaporates, leaving salt behind. So there's that was the answer on the multiple choice. So that's just what you want to look at before the exam. If you have to memorize something, and you feel better and more comfortable memorizing, this is what you want to memorize, this stuff.
Thank you, Mr.
And then you'll actually probably do pretty well in the AP exam if you're a memorization type person.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Don't worry,
You're
you can just memorize this one.
All right, so we're going to take 5 minutes and you can go to the restroom. All right?
5 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to start back up.
One short.